Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into a world that often feels like something out of a movie, but it's increasingly our reality. The changing face of cyber warfare. We've got a really interesting set of sources here, and they shed light on this sort of shadowy conflict going on between two major players, Israel and Iran. So our mission today is to unpack how this virtual battlefield is spilling over into the physical one, and what that really means for everyone, not just those directly involved.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because these clashes, they represent a whole new front in international relations, moving way beyond traditional military stuff. We're entering this space where the lines are getting really blurred, between state and non-state actors, even civilian and military targets, and that's, frankly, quite dangerous.
Okay, let's dig into that with a specific and honestly pretty chilling example from April 2020. Imagine waking up and the water you drink, it could have been turned into a weapon. Our sources lay out this attempt to hack Israel's water network.
Right, and this wasn't just some minor glitch. Hackers, who were later tracked back to Iran, they tried to manipulate the system. They aimed to pump a really dangerous, much higher than normal amount of chlorine into the drinking water. And in large doses like that, chlorine is basically poison. It can cause severe internal damage, potentially even death.
Luckily, cyber defenders caught it. They stopped the hack partway through. But what really jumps out from the sources is this quote from an Israeli official. He called it an attack that goes against all codes, even in war. Why? Because the only target was the civilian population. That signaled something new, didn't it? A more aggressive step from Iran.
Absolutely. It showed how they'd been building their cyber capabilities, especially after that big Stuxnet hack back in 2009-2010. It's all part of their asymmetrical warfare idea. Inflict damage, but try to keep some deniability, make it hard to pin down.
So how sophisticated was this water network attempt, really?
Well, this Israeli investigation concluded it was highly sophisticated. This wasn't something thrown together quickly. It looked like it was prepared over months, gathering intel, exploring the networks very slowly, trying not to get detected. They might have even, get this, infected third-party software updates, forging digital keys to slip past malware detection. I mean, that kind of capability, that's usually state or state-sponsored actors, not your average hacker group.
And what's really intriguing is how they might have pulled it off. Because critical infrastructure like water systems, they're normally air-gapped, right?
Exactly. Isolated from the public internet. That's the whole point.
So this attack suggests maybe two ways in. Either they hacked directly into the chemical control software somehow.
A direct breach.
Or maybe they got hold of credentials from a third-party supplier. Something they could have snagged, months or even years before in a totally separate hack.
That's definitely plausible. Sometimes these breaches happen long before the actual attack. The access lies dormant.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Apparently, Iran's attack was, let's say, calibrated, designed to be non-lethal. They assumed Israel would respond, proportionally, keep it limited. But they seem to have read that completely wrong.
They really did miscalculate. Look, Israel generally tries to stick to proportionality and, conventional fights, tanks, planes, that sort of thing. But cyber, it's still seen by many as a bit of a Wild West. The rules aren't as clear. And Israel's response wasn't just cyber eye for an eye. It was, as one source put it, more like 10 eyes for an eye, a massively disproportionate cyber strike.
Wow. Okay, so what happened? Just over 2 weeks after that water attack, this is May 2020 now, suddenly shipping traffic at Iran's Shahid Rajeh port just stops. Dead halt. And this is one of their two most important sea terminals.
Yeah, all the computers controlling everything, the ships coming in, the trucks moving goods, the logistics, they all just went down simultaneously. It caused chaos for days. Huge backlogs, total gridlock.
And that port, it wasn't just economically important, right? It had symbolic weight, too.
Absolutely. It was the naval headquarters for the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, and they used that very port to ship weapons to groups fighting Israel.
So if you zoom out, what does this tit for tat, or rather 10 eyes for eye, tell us?
Well, this incident, along with things like Stuxnet before it and, Russia's election interference efforts, they give us these glimpses into the future of cyber conflict. It's like this ongoing chess game, but with a massive psychological element baked in.
How so?
Israel was deliberately ambiguous about who did it. They dropped hints, talked about awarding certificates of appreciation to unnamed units, made official statements about a first and significant step. It was all designed as a clear message of deterrence, basically saying, don't mess with us in cyberspace. Don't underestimate our ability to hit back hard. And we can scale this up way more than you can.
So the message wasn't just about cyber retaliation, it hinted at more.
Exactly. It implied that future responses could cross over. Maybe actual military strikes, or maybe some kind of devastating combination, overt action, covert ops, and cyber attacks altogether.
Okay, but let's back up a bit. How did Iran even get to this point? How could they pose such a serious cyber threat, especially when you think about Israel being, a global cyber powerhouse?
Right, that's a crucial question. And it points to something often overlooked about Iran. Its people, its human resources are vast. You're talking about a country of 80 million people, highly educated. They rank 5th in the world for STEM graduates. That's huge, only behind China, India, the US, and Russia.
And our sources point to two specific events that really pushed Iran to prioritize cyber warfare. The first was back in 2009, the Green Movement protests.
Social media was key there, organizing protests against what many saw as a rigged election.
That was apparently a massive wake-up call for the Iranian authorities. They realized they needed to get a handle on controlling information, controlling these technologies.
And the second event, maybe even more impactful, was Stuxnet in 2010. That attack on their nuclear facilities, yes, it definitely set back their nuclear program, but it also, as one source vividly put it, woke up the sleeping Iranian cyber lion. It showed them just how vulnerable their systems were and how urgently they needed defenses.
But didn't Stuxnet also kind of give them ideas?
That's the fascinating thing about cyber weapons. It's unique to this domain. When you use a digital weapon, its code, its workings often get exposed. The target can analyze it, reverse engineer it, and basically learn how to build similar tools themselves, adapt it for their own arsenal. And that's exactly how Iran started seeing cyber warfare as this vital asymmetric tool, a way to compete, or at least punch back, against adversaries with superior conventional military power.
Which explains the money then, the sheer investment.
Precisely. Iran reportedly increased its security budget by something like 1,200% under President Rouhani, an incredible jump. They pushed hard to become a top 5 cyber power, integrating cyber directly into their military doctrine. It became central.
So fast forward to 2020. Iran was already stepping up its cyber game, right? Hacking Israeli companies, political figures.
Yes, the activity was intensifying. But our sources suggest Israel wasn't maybe fully prepared for attacks targeting real-world infrastructure, not just data theft.
And the conflict really heated up through 2020, peaking later, especially after some major assassinations and attacks on Iranian nuclear sites in 2021 and 2022.
Right. There was a definite cycle of escalation and counter-escalation. So how did Israel hit back after things like the Sherbet insurance hack and other attacks around that time?
Well, in October 2021, Israel seems to have struck again. Harder, and maybe more creatively this time. Suddenly, every single gas station in Iran, all 4,300 of them went offline. Total outage.
An attack on the gas stations. How did they manage that?
It was apparently a cyber attack on the central network system that millions of Iranians use to buy subsidized fuel with special cards.
Wow. The impact must have been immediate.
Oh, total chaos. Reports of taxi prices doubling, massive lines forming, people getting angry, real tension between ordinary Iranians and the regime. And get this, digital billboards in Tehran and Isfahan were apparently hacked to display messages like, "Khamenei, where is our gasoline?"
So it wasn't just about causing disruption, it was psychological warfare, designed to stir up trouble. Sow distrust.
Seems like it. President Raisi pretty much confirmed that element, didn't he? He framed the disruption as a plot specifically designed to create disorder.
And beyond just the chaos and the psych ops, there was another layer. Iranian officials reportedly believed the hackers might have gotten access to really sensitive data, specifically data on international oil sales. That's likely a huge state secret how Iran gets around international sanctions.
And that data was supposedly on an air-gapped system.
That's what the reports indicate, which, if true, points to an incredibly sophisticated breach. Getting into an air-gapped system is non-trivial, to say the least.
But Iran wouldn't take that lying down. Retaliation was coming.
Pretty much immediately. The sources say on the very same day that an Iranian general publicly blamed the Zionist regime for the gas station hack, a group linked to Iran called Black Shadow launched its own attack. They hit CyberServe.
And CyberServe is a big deal in Israel.
Yeah, it's a major web hosting company. Hosts websites and data for lots of significant Israeli companies and organizations.
And the targets Black Shadow went after. They seem very specific, very personal.
Extremely. They targeted Ahrefs, which is a big Israeli LGBTQ dating site. They threatened to leak highly personal data, things like users' HIV status, sexual orientation, private messages, and at the same time, they hit the Mashon Moore Medical Institute, hacked their files.
Lead into a data dump.
Huh.
How much data?
Personal information for about 1.5 million Israelis. That's roughly 16% of the entire country's population. Medical files, personal details, all out there.
And the hackers were trying to extort them first.
Yes, they posted messages like, if you don't want your data leaked by us, contact us soon. Standard ransomware tactic, but with incredibly sensitive data.
When the demands weren't met, they just dumped it all online.
Dumped it all. And they hit other places too. Bus companies, a children's museum, tourism companies. Some of those likely held sensitive medical data too, perhaps from travel forms or insurance.
Okay, so these attacks hitting dating sites and medical institutes, they might seem, I don't know, less effective than shutting down a port or gas stations.
You might think that initially, but you have to consider the context. Israel's population is much smaller, right? 9 million versus Iran's 80 million. So causing significant social disruption, economic disruption, leaking data on that scale, it really does pose a genuine national security threat.
So why are these data hacks so dangerous then, beyond the obvious privacy violations?
Well, there are a few key reasons according to the sources. First, that personal data. It can be a stepping stone, a gateway to bigger hacks later on, maybe targeting infrastructure. Second, think about whose data might be in there. Intelligence agents, maybe their families. And with AI getting better, you can connect seemingly random bits of data to identify people in sensitive security roles. That's a huge risk.
Right. Third, ransomware hitting big businesses.
Yeah.
It exposes what some analysts call the soft geopolitical underbelly of democracy, especially in a smaller, highly digitized economy like Israel's. Imagine a major insurance company getting crippled, or even just one major hospital. The knock-on effects could destabilize things quickly.
And there's a really concerning detail in the CyberServe case specifically.
What's that?
Apparently, Israel's National Cyber Directorate, the INCD, had actually warned CyberServe about a likely attack 4 days before it happened.
They warned them, so why wasn't more done?
Well, the report suggests a company official was away for the weekend and basically said he'd deal with it later, kicked the can down the road.
Wow, that's unfortunate.
And the INCD, while it can order critical infrastructure companies to tighten security, it doesn't have the same authority over private sector companies like CyberServe. A potential gap there. Yeah, that highlights a real challenge in coordinating national cyber defense when so much relies on private entities. So if we try to take stock, where does this leave things? The state of cyber warfare between Israel and Iran seems, well, murky, but it does suggest something interesting, right? It suggests a growing level of parity, at least in this specific cyber domain. I mean, Iran is still considered way behind Israel in overall global cybersecurity rankings and capabilities. But in the cybersphere, they can threaten Israel in ways they just can't on most other military fronts. Why is that possible?
Our sources seem to boil it down to three main factors. First, there's a general principle in cyber. Offense usually beats defense, or at least has the advantage. Any digital wall, any defense, it's going to have vulnerabilities. And if an adversary has enough time, enough resources, they can probably find a way in eventually.
Right. The attacker only needs to find one flaw. The defender has to protect everything. It's inherently asymmetric. Second factor, another asymmetry. Israeli society is just so much more dependent on technology, highly digitized, which means they have way more high-value targets, more things that can be disrupted. So arguably, they have far more to lose in a cyber exchange.
Makes sense. And the third factor?
It's about the technology itself. That gap between the big players, China, Russia, the US, Israel, and everyone else, it's narrowing.
You mean the tools are becoming more available?
Exactly. This democratization of cyber weapons, as some call it. More groups, even some without direct state backing, can get their hands on powerful tools and cause serious geopolitical trouble.
So it becomes like this endless game of whack-a-mole, trying to track and stop all these non-state groups that have capabilities that used to belong only to nations.
Pretty much. It makes managing the threat landscape incredibly difficult. How do you deter or respond to an attack when you're not even sure who exactly is behind it or what their motives are?
So a key takeaway from our sources seems to be that up to now, most of these cyber clashes, intense as they seem, have basically been like virtual border skirmishes. Tests, disruptions, but maybe not existential threats yet.
Largely, yes. But that raises the big looming question, doesn't it? How long until one side, maybe miscalculating, maybe intentionally, mounts a cyber attack that truly undermines state security in a fundamental existential way? Are we heading towards what some analysts worry about, a cyber winter, a period of sustained, widespread, really devastating digital disruption that fundamentally changes things?
So wrapping this up, what does all this mean for you listening? Well, As we all live more and more of our lives online, this deep dive really shows how these quiet, often invisible battles in cyberspace, they're actually shaping our physical world. From the water coming out of your tap to the fuel in your car, even the security of your personal data online, it's all connected.
Yeah, and this ongoing conflict really hammers home the need for constant vigilance, for adaptability, and just for a better understanding of how deeply interconnected our digital and physical lives really are now.
So the next time you hear about some big hack or digital disruption, maybe think beyond just the immediate inconvenience. Think about the layers underneath the strategy, the retaliation, the constantly evolving capabilities. It's a stark reminder that in this new era of conflict, sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't the ones you can see.
Perhaps the biggest takeaway isn't just about the power of these cyber weapons themselves, it's about their ripple effect, how they impact social stability, the economy, and maybe most importantly, the trust we place in the digital systems that run almost everything. What's the ultimate cost going to be as this cyber winter potentially intensifies?